Welcome to the Holy Post. The Hallmark Channel is now producing Christmas movies with LGBTQ characters and relationships, leading the network's former CEO to launch a new holiday movie channel with straight relationships only. Today on the Holy Post, we discuss the role of representation in entertainment and why so many recent LGBTQ-centric movies have bombed at the box office. Then, Al Mohler attacked David French for not opposing civil same-sex marriages, leading Phil to ask whether Mohler is more interested in defending Christianity or just conservatism. And then I talk with Josh Packard from Springtide Research about the mental health of Gen Z and how new data shows young people who engage in spiritual practices experience better mental health, but they're not often the practices that most churches promote. Before we jump into the episode, two quick notes. First, we have a new episode of Christian Asks this week, exclusively for our Patreon supporters. So if you're not a supporter yet, go to holypost.com and click the Support Us button to get access to all of those bonus episodes, as well as bonus interviews with our guests and the Getting Schooled by Caitlin Chess series. And then secondly, if you want to get Holy Post merchandise in time for Christmas, you should go to our website and order that soon. Okay, here is episode 537.
Hi there, welcome back to the Holy Post podcast. I'm Phil Vischer. I'm here with Christian Taylor. Hi, Christian.
Hey, Phil. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. And Skye Jatani. Hi, Skye.
Hi. Excuse me. Hi.
We want to ask you how you are.
There.
Was it last week or the week before? I was sick for the recording, and today Skye is sick for the recording.
I am slightly under the weather.
We're passing it around. Just passing it around town, Christian.
Through the interwebs.
It's coming your way, Christian. The hot potato of viral infection.
I already had mine. I'm past it.
Really? You're all done? Oh,
it was like
wow.
6 weeks of coughing and congestion. And just kind of lingers.
I'm coming out of it, but I'm not quite out of it. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It may last until Christmas. It'll be my little Christmas to myself gift. Okay. Theme song. What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. And sometimes Christian. Skye, how was your travel abroad? You were a Skye abroad.
Absolutely delightful. In fact,
really?
I wasn't sick until today, so the trip was perfect.
Good.
We had just a great family time. We were in London and then in Paris. We did shows in the West End. Christian, you'll love this. My son and dad and I toured the Churchill War Rooms.
I'm dying to go there.
Oh, it was so cool.
Where are they?
They're in Westminster, and they're the rooms where they basically coordinated all the British war efforts in World War II. And like some of the rooms they shut the door on VE Day and they reopened them recently. And it's like, there's even sugar cubes from someone's tea that are still sitting on the desk. Like it's absolutely preserved. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, did they say anything about Bletchley Park?
No.
Because I would find that interesting too, just to go there and see where they decrypted the Enigma.
That would be fun.
Great.
But I watched the movie about that, so I know all about that.
Right.
Because Benedict Cumberbatch made it all happen.
He did.
Well, on the flight home from Paris the other day, I watched The Darkest Hour, which is the Gary Oldman Churchill movie.
Yeah.
And like it looks like they filmed a lot of it in the same rooms that we toured. It was amazing.
That's cool.
Yeah, It was very, very cool.
Where'd
Paris
you fly
was delightful.
home?
The weather was fantastic. We got to see my oldest daughter who's studying in Europe this semester. And we had Thanksgiving dinner on the Champs-Élysées. It was just exquisite. It was great.
That's great.
Wow.
What airline did you fly?
British Airways.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. Did you watch The Girl Who Wore Freedom on your flight?
No, because it's only on Delta Airlines and Air France. That's why I was asking.
Yeah. We flew in and out of London, and we took the Channel over to Paris. So
you channeled?
We channeled.
Did you get nervous under the whole English Channel?
No, I've done it before.
Okay.
And honestly, you don't even realize it's a brief part of the trip.
Yeah,
so,
but until it all collapses.
That there are billions and billions of pounds of water above you that could come crashing down. I would never in a million years put myself in that kind of imminent peril because You just never know. Like,
Perilous.
Why didn't you just take the ferry?
I think you're probably in more danger on the surface of the water than on a ferry. I've done the ferry too, but and first of all, the tunnel is dug in the bedrock underneath the channel. It's not like you're surrounded by water.
Even better, water and all the dirt.
Yeah, that's just what the Germans want you to think it's safe. That is their plan. Okay, I got a lot to talk about today. We just passed Thanksgiving. We're done with Thanksgiving. Do you know what that means?
It's time for Christmas.
It's time for Hallmark Christmas movies. Except we have a little controversy this year. We know about the war on Christmas. You know, there was this war on Christmas where the globalists, wanted us to never say the word Christmas again and wanted us to just hold red cups but not have Jesus on our cups, Jesus-less cups.
I remember that. And they wanted us all to say Happy Holidays.
Happy Holidays or just Hanukkah. And Kwanzaa.
Which will be a future episode or edition of How Stupid Do You Think God Is?
Yeah, okay, good. I'm looking forward to that. I hope it doesn't offend anyone. Anyway, we have a new war on Christmas, but it's not a war on Christmas. It's a war of Christmas movies. And here's what's going on. I don't know if you followed this, but several years ago, first of all, Hallmark, the Hallmark Channel discovered that a large segment of the American population has a particular kryptonite that they discovered, which is Christmas movies. They can't get enough Christmas movies, and it renders them semi-conscious on the couch, unable to do anything but continue watching more Christmas movies. So you may not, Skye, you're acting like you don't know this.
No, I'm confused by the kryptonite metaphor.
It's like the secret weapon against us. It renders us immobile.
Oh, because it seems like it seems like it's more like crack, not kryptonite.
Cryptocrack.
Yeah, like it's addictive.
It's crackonite.
I
Sure.
totally agree with you, Skye.
Okay, whatever. So anyway, Hallmark has been making like 15 to 20 new Christmas movies every year. It's the majority of their programming budget. Because it's not
the
just
exact same movie every time. They just swap out the title and the actors.
Yes, they have a formula. They have a formula, and they're pretty open about the formula. This has to happen, then this has to happen, then this. And if you want to write one for us, you have to follow this formula. And one of the rules is Christmas on every frame. So you should never have a shot that doesn't have snow in it or green in it, or tinsel in it, or candles in it, Christmas on every frame. So it's huge success, and it's very traditional. You know, it reminds you of your childhood, and it takes you back to simpler days, and it's often about a big city gal or guy going to a small town, doesn't want to be, it's like, basically, they're all the movie Cars, you know, or Doc Holliday. Doc Hollywood, I think was the name of that movie.
Right, with Michael J. Fox.
Where the big city sophisticate has to go to back home or somewhere and then discovers the true meaning of Christmas and love. Love,
of course.
Romance. So many of them are rom-coms. Okay, so here's what happened several years ago. One sponsor of the Hallmark Channel movies wanted to run an ad on Hallmark that had a same-sex couple in it. And the chairman...
We talked about this.
Yeah, we talked about it this time. The chairman of the Hallmark Channel said, "Nuh-uh, that is not what my audience wants." That news got out. People went cuckoo crazy. What? He had to back down. Hallmark said, and then people started complaining about the content of the lack of diversity in the movies they were making. So the company said, we are going to be more diverse. We're going to start introducing, not only are we going to accept that ad with the same-sex couple, but we're going to start introducing same-sex romance into our Christmas movies. Within a year, the head of the Hallmark Channel left the Hallmark Channel. He was the one who had built it. He was Mr. Christmas Movie. He left, and now many of the key stars have left the Hallmark Channel and have followed the former CEO of the Hallmark Channel to a new channel that he has taken over. It used to be called Great American Country, and it's now called Great American Family. And they're going to be making Christmas movies exclusively for their new network, Great American Family, to compete with the Hallmark Channel. But there will be no LGBTQ storylines in their movies. So they're going to be making
Christmas movies the way God intended.
They're making Christmas movies great again, I believe. One of the leaders of Great American Christmas Movies. One of the GACM. One of the leaders of the movement is one of the biggest stars, actually the biggest star of the Christmas movies on the Hallmark Channel, which is Candace Cameron Bure, who is whose sister? Skye?
Kirk Cameron.
Got it. Good job. You've been paying attention. Kirk Cameron's sister. She was the oldest daughter on Full House. Kirk Cameron was the son on, what was this show?
What was it? Not Family Ties.
No. It was another one about fathers.
Was it Family Ties? Was it Family Ties?
No,
that was
not
Michael J.
Family
Fox.
Ties.
Oh, that's right. That's Michael J. Fox.
I'll think about it. But by the way, her name is Bure, Candace Cameron Bure.
Oh, really? That's how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, her husband is a Russian hockey player. I read that today. I thought that was interesting. That's not very American. But anyway, so it's Bure, Candace Cameron Bure. Okay.
Yeah, I had to actually do a thing.
You had to do a thing.
Yeah, I had to do a voiceover thing. That's the only reason I know how to pronounce it.
Okay. So she was interviewed recently. So she left Hallmark and has signed a new contract. She is now the creative director for Great American Family. Lori Loughlin, best known for going to prison for the college entrance cheating scandal.
She was on Full House too, right?
Yes, she was. Almost everyone from Full House went to prison, and they're now making Christmas movies. I don't know. That's a Christmas movie, isn't it?
It's a Christmas movie in itself.
We were sitcom stars. We went to prison, and now we make Christmas movies. We found the true meaning of Christmas, maybe in prison, or does that not work? Can you find the true meaning of Christmas in prison? Chuck Colson did.
Known as the Big House, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a fuller house, depending on how many people were sending up the river. So here's the interesting thing so Wall Street Journal interviewed Candace Cameron Bure. Beret, like a French hat? Yeah. That's what it is? Okay. Yeah. Wall Street Journal did a big story about her and said, so will you have any same-sex relationships or marriages on Great American Family? And she said, we're going to stick to traditional families. And so people have kind of gone nuts and, she's not going to show diversity and she's not going to show representation. And, and other people have come to her defense and said, well, can't you just tell the stories you want to tell? Can't you just show the world the way you like the world to be? And other people say, no, that's bigoted. And now it's a war. It's a big war. And you know who JoJo Siwa is? That's her like TikTok name.
No.
JoJo Siwa. She was Candace Cameron Bure's little sister on Full House.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
What was going on with this show?
And she's now an LGBTQ activist. So they've been kind of battling each other, the two of the sisters, the one that isn't an Olsen twin. Then there's the Olsen twins. We got to talk about them. They're not involved, except their little sister is now the Red Witch. So I think that's satanic. So I don't know what that means.
Scarlet Witch.
Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Scarlet Witch that came to the Red Wedding. I'm just going to combine it all together. So what do you think? What do you think? Is it much ado about nothing? Is it wrong to say, like, if you know your audience is, comfort food, is Cracker Barrel, and they just want a Christmas movie that feels like it was made in the 50s, are you doing a disservice to give them what they want, which is just a man and a woman falling in love at Christmas time?
Can I offer a few other data points to this conversation?
Please.
Okay. Have you found my selection dissatisfactory?
No, I'm trying to shift the conversation from purely one of right and wrong to one of profit and loss.
Okay, go.
So 2 movies have come out recently that were groundbreaking because they featured central characters that were LGBT. So one was the movie Bros. Did you hear about that movie?
Yes.
I did not.
Yes. The first mainstream LGBTQ rom-com.
That's right. So it was celebrated, it was heralded, it was, given lots of publicity because it was groundbreaking. And from what I looked up, it between production and marketing cost about $60 million to make that movie. So far, it has grossed 14 million in the box office. It has been
bombed.
That's not good
bomb.
from movie money making.
That's not good. That's
and
not
then
good.
secondly, just over Thanksgiving week, Disney released the first ever animated Disney movie that featured an LGBTQ main character, and their sexual identity was central to the plot of the story, which is also groundbreaking because you're talking about family and children's media here for the first time ever. It's called Strange World. That movie has completely bombed in the box office. So without arguing whether this is right or wrong, I'm purely from an economic business point of view, it seems like Hallmark, in their decision to centralize LGBTQ relationships and characters, are not making the best business decision. Now, there may be ethical reasons to feature those characters because you want to be an inclusive and representative network that shows the diversity that is America. I think there's a place for that. But just on a purely business side, it doesn't make sense. And I'm wondering what Bros and Strange World, these two really high-profile movies bombing in the box office, is going to do to the future of these kinds of projects. Because at the end of the day, Hollywood wants to make money too.
Do they?
I think so.
They're just globalists that want to change the world and do what George Soros says.
Isn't there sort of a middle ground here, Skye? I mean, maybe Hallmark's thinking is the majority of their movies remain heterosexual and like they always have. I think they've interspersed with, other movies that are more diverse, and in an effort to recognize that diversity is important to them. But I think they probably realize that their bread and butter is going to continue to be the same audience, which seems to me a respectful way to kind of deal with the controversy, I think.
Yeah.
Because it does kind of, if you don't want to watch that sort of diverse film, you can choose not to. But you do have a whole list of other films that you could watch as well.
Yeah, I think what they're failing to understand here is we've had really, really successful movies, rom-coms and others, for a long time that have gay characters in them. The difference is when you make them the lead characters and you make the primary relationship a same-sex relationship. When people go watch a movie, I don't care what kind of movie it is, action movie, comedy movie, rom-com movie, drama, the audience puts themselves in the shoes of the main characters. And it was kind of a revolution when in the 1960s, like Sidney Poitier and others who were black actors were given leading roles because for the first time, white Americans were willing to put themselves in the shoes of a black actor and identify with that person in their struggle in the plot. The problem with the LGBT thing is it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of a character when they are romantically engaged with somebody that you are not attracted to. And whether you agree with this or not, LGBT folks are a numerical minority of the movie purchasing population. And so if you're trying to have a successful movie with gay characters at the center of it, you have to convince non-gay American ticket buyers to identify with a gay character who's romantically engaged with someone you would never be romantically engaged with. And it's a step that I don't think they're being realistic about in trying to push these characters at the center. I'm not trying to make a judgment if this is right or wrong, but I think it's just a violation of basic entertainment psychology.
But so
there's not enough of an audience that identifies with those characters.
Skye, can I talk? Can I say something?
May.
Okay. What's the difference? When is visibility, seeing yourself on screen, so important that it trumps marketability or profitability? Because there's been for the past about 10 years, just this growing call for representation from Hollywood,
right.
Whether it was the Latino audience saying, I don't see myself on screen. Or disability, people with disabilities. I never see myself on screen. I've never seen someone with Down syndrome on screen. I've never, and so there's been a tremendous amount of energy exerted to raise representation on screen, which includes a Disney executive, being recorded saying from now on for Disney films, half of the characters must be a minority, either an ethnic or sexual minority. That's our rule going forward.
And that's why I was saying there is a place for this if you discount the economic part of it. I'm purely talking economically. I haven't seen an example yet that has been successful. Now, the flip side of it, though, is, and this is going to get me into some dangerous territory, I think there's a psychological thing here that needs to be investigated. Again, it's if you have a mixed race couple, most Americans can imagine themselves in a relationship with somebody who's of a different race. But to say I need to imagine myself in a relationship with somebody who's my same gender, that's a much bigger stretch for an audience to make than to say, I need to imagine myself in the shoes of the main character who's attracted to somebody of a different racial background. And that's where I think they're underestimating the inability of most people to make that psychological leap as they watch entertainment. Well,
and I think that's true, not just for people that are homophobic. Like, I think it's true in general. So you have a whole, section of people that are very, very angry against, anything other than heterosexual people. And, but I think it would be difficult for people that are warm and embracing to the LGBTQ plus community. And I think you make a very, very good point. And the question would be, over time, as they see that these movies are not, they're losing tons of money, are they going to reduce the budget and still make the movies? Like they have now proof of concept. They know what these movies will or won't do at the box office. So will they reduce the budget and still do the movies, or are they not going to do them altogether? Like, what will Hollywood do?
And it's interesting that there's like overreactions on both sides, because it sounded like the Great American Family Network. Yeah. They won't even feature LGBT characters in non-central roles. Right? They're not going to depict them at all.
I didn't pick that up. Because that's a question. Are you if you're trying to present a world where certain classes of people do not exist,
right?
I'm pretty uncomfortable with that. If you're simply not centering certain classes of people in your stories, then there may be an argument that, okay, in this scenario, that may be acceptable to say, we're not telling Hindu stories here. We don't, maybe we'll have a Hindu person in our Christmas movie, but we're not going to have a Christmas movie about Hindus. And you say, okay, well, I think that's probably okay. Right?
Yeah, and the thing this reminds me of is there's been controversy for years about why aren't there more action movies with lead female characters? And there have been quite a few at this point. Marvel's done.
It's almost all we have now.
There's a lot of them, but generally they also underperform in the box office. And it's the same reason, because male audiences are more drawn to action movies and they want to identify, James Bond, Indiana Jones, you name it, Luke Skywalker, they want to identify with the main hero character, and they tend not to do that when they're of another gender. Similarly, it's harder to do that when the main character is of a sexual orientation that you do not identify with. And again, just numerically, there are fewer LGBT people who buy tickets to movies than there are straight people.
Numerically speaking, although they are an avid movie-going audience.
Right. So I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying there are economic factors here that I think are going to play out in the coming years that are going to be really interesting to watch. Yeah. And like you said, Christian, how much is Hollywood going to continue to invest in this if they lose money on every movie they make?
Well, and one thing that I was thinking about as I was listening to you, there are some that have been very successful, like Will and Grace, for example. I mean, two of the main characters are homosexual characters, and it did incredibly well. So what's the difference between a Will and Grace, or even a Brokeback Mountain? I mean, there have been media things before that have done well in the past. So what's different now?
Yeah, they tend to be low budget things. Well, TV is different. And Will and Grace wasn't a rom-com between two men.
Right.
Or a rom-com between two women. It was. So, I mean, if you go back, like in the history of race representation, there was a whole period where you didn't see African Americans on screen unless they were, the housekeeper or the gardener. And then we entered a new phase where it was a little more progressive, but we entered a phase that they now call the phase of the magical Negro, that's actually a thing where
I've never heard of that.
And it's like Shawshank Redemption, where the central character is white, but a transformative character is African American. Or what's the golf movie with Matt Damon?
The Bagger Vance?
Yeah,
Legend of
Bagger Vance. Yeah, that's another magical Negro story where Will Smith plays this just amazing side character that results in the complete life transformation of the central white character. You know, and so some people said, well, this is progress. We're
Driving Miss Daisy.
Driving Miss Daisy. Yeah. Again, same guy, Morgan Freeman, again, playing or, you know, for that matter, I guess when he plays God opposite of Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey.
That's like the ultimate magical Negro is when you make him God and he can do anything exactly. Except have a character arc. You know, which in none of those cases does the African American character have a character arc. They are the catalyst for the central white character's character arc. And so now you've seen, to a certain extent, you've seen that with gay characters where they do not have an arc because we're not that interested in their story. But they're a best friend, they're a sidekick, they're a funny guy or a funny girl, and it's okay that they exist. It's okay that they exist, and it's okay that we see them. I don't want the story centered about them because then I can't relate to the story. And that's where, you know, my fear is that GAF, Great American Family, is going so far as to erase the existence of sexual or gender minorities, which I don't think is beneficial at all to society. To just say, hey, these people don't exist in this world, so join us in this world where the people you don't like don't exist.
Well, and they might be successful with that business model. I mean, there really is half our nation views things differently than the other half of our nation. So
right. Well, it's red TV and blue TV. In blue TV, everyone is a minority. In red TV, no one is a minority, unless they're my funny friend that only comes over once in a while and doesn't bring their boyfriend with them. All right. You got something else to say, Skye, or
no,
can I move on?
I just want to be clear. I'm not opposed to these kinds of films being made. I just, and I understand the positive altruistic reason for wanting them to be made for representational purposes. But again, we can't ignore the psychological reality of entertainment and the way people identify with main characters. And it's another example of how, again, this is going to get me in trouble, how race and sexual identity are somewhat different categories. Mm-hmm. They're not equivalent in the way we engage them. And so as much as there was a long journey for Black and other non-white actors to be represented in Hollywood productions, we've crossed that river. We've done it. Like some of the biggest box office earners in the world are Black actors and actresses. But my curiosity is, can that happen not just with LGBTQ actors? I think it certainly can, but can you make LGBTQ relationships central to a plot and have that kind of success? That so far we have not seen work, and I'm curious if it will. And
the concern that Disney or someone is trying to get to my kids with, you know, an agenda to try to get them to think differently about something without me knowing about it. Again, it's the same issue we have, you know, trying to take over school boards and trying to, you know, ban books. Like, I want to be the one to explain the world to my kids. I don't want you to do it behind my back. And so it's very easy to use, you know, like the recording of the Disney executive saying, we're going to put gay characters in, you know, every show we make. And like the best 3 or 4 Disney animated films have all had gay characters in them, you know, getting closer and closer to the center of the film. And whether or not you think that's a good thing because of representation, it is turning off a huge percentage of the American public that doesn't want to go there. And so now you have Ben Shapiro starting his own children's film production company and raising $100 million to make animated films that are squarely red state targeted films. So we're bifurcating our entertainment industry, just like we've bifurcated first our politics and now our churches and our news sources and everything else.
And you know, the problem is when these movies do fail, they're often, the accusation is, well, America's just bigoted. There's just, everyone's a bigot. They're not, that's why they're not supporting these things. And no doubt there's a factor that there is a point to that, but I think you can't explain $14 million for Bros, and I don't know what the numbers are for Strange World right now, but they're abysmal. And it's not all because of bigotry. It's because people go to the movies to identify with the main characters and the story. And if your main character is fundamentally different than the majority of American ticket buyers, it's a hard sell. And that's just an economic fact that you're going to have to wrestle with.
I do think the first time I saw a preview for Strange Worlds or Stranger Worlds or Stranger Things or whatever it is, the new Disney movie, I thought to myself, I have no desire to see that, and I don't think it's going to do well. I had no idea there was an LGBTQ character in it. That wasn't why. The reason I thought so is because they couldn't make a trailer that told you what the movie was about. There was no story. There's no story in the trailer. It's just, some normal-ish looking people are in a weird place. Okay, that's not a story. That's a scene. If you show me a scene, I can't infer the story. Then if the next thing you hear is some news story on Fox News that says, they're trying to push a gay agenda in their new movie, well, now half of America is really not interested in seeing it. Besides the fact that it doesn't have, you watch a trailer for WALL-E and you know there's a story there. Oh, well, how did he get there? What's going on? You watch a trailer for Strange World and it's just, what a strange world.
So do you think if the movie had been intrinsically good, it would have made a difference?
It would have made more money.
Yeah.
Because there would have been more interest in it.
I was just looking on Rotten Tomatoes, and both, like, Bros has an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience score is 90%. And Strange World has, where'd it go? Anyway, it was like 75% positive and 60 something on the audience score. So it seems like the people who are going to these movies like these movies.
60 something on the audience score for a Disney animated film is atrociously bad.
Okay.
That's atrocious. So the audience that has seen the film doesn't like the film.
Okay. Well, Bros is 90% audience score and 88 on critic score. So again, the people who are going to this movie like this movie, but there aren't enough people to go. That's the problem.
Go look at the audience score for God's Not Dead. It is off the chart.
Oh, let's see.
I'm the chart now. Because the people who go to see, and that's why audience scores almost never really matter, because people usually know if they're going to like a movie before they go see it based on clues. What is it?
So God's Not Dead, the tomato meter is 12%.
Yeah.
And the audience score is 75.
Okay, well, it's higher than Stranger Worlds, but
yeah,
it's lower than I remembered. Most Christian movies get really massive audience scores because the only people that go see them are the ones that are predisposed to love that message.
So is that where this all goes? Do LGBT movies kind of follow a similar track as Christian movies, where they're lower budget to a niche audience that really wants them?
They always have been. So the question is, can they cross over and be mainstream? Can a mainstream American audience enjoy watching two men fall in love and kiss? And by and large, the answer is no.
Not yet. Right.
Not yet? Are you going against culture, or are you going against, people's biology?
Because that's a bigger can of worms.
I know. I'm not going there. Oh, did I? Oh, man, I'm backing up. I'm putting the car in reverse and backing up. Christian, do you have any last thoughts on that as a filmmaker?
No, the only thing that I would say is I do agree with Skye 100% that I think it's going to be a real interesting economic question at the end of the day. And I think that you're right. It comes down to identity. I personally, feel like diverse representation in our media is a really important thing, because it helps us learn how to relate with people that are different. And I think we have a problem with that in our society. We don't sit down and listen to people that are different from us. And really, the only way that we can learn is when we see them in magazines. We read stories about them in the news. We watch their struggles on, in entertainment stories. So I do think it's important for there to be diverse representation, whether it's racial or sexual. And I do think it's also important that people from those backgrounds can see themselves reflected back in our entertainment. How that's going to happen is anybody's guess at this point, especially since, the whole entertainment industry is having a seismic shift right now with its, distribution and everything aligning differently than it's ever been before. So, Skye, I think you got a good point. We'll see what happens. You
got a good point, Skye. We'll see what happens. Okay. We'll come back to you. after we've seen how this all plays out. You're going to talk to David French, actually later today for this Friday, French Friday. This Friday is French Friday, everybody. Come back for the French fries. And you're going to talk about a story and that I'm also going to talk about a little bit, but from a different angle. Okay? Is that okay? Is that okay with you, Skye?
Yes.
Okay with me.
I don't think you need my permission.
I don't want to upset you because, I don't want you to be mad at me because I've seen what happens to people that cross Skye Jitani.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Vicious.
So David French wrote a piece in The Atlantic that described how he's changed his position twice on gay marriage in civil life, basically. Not his position on whether he thinks gay marriage is or isn't biblical, but his position on whether he thinks it's appropriate to support or not support gay marriage in law in the United States as a pluralistic society. And where he's currently come out is that he believes the new law, the Respect for Marriage Act, is that what it's called? Respect for Marriage Act?
Yeah.
That he supports it, that he thinks it would be unwise and potentially even cruel to allow people's marriages to be taken away that they have been living with for, 5, 6, 7 years and setting up families based on the assumption that they had these legal protections as a family.
In some cases, it's longer for states that legalized it before the Supreme Court did.
You are correct. So he got a lot of pushback. I think that's an understatement. He got a lot of pushback. And the big one, it was a lot of smaller voices saying, "We hate you, David French. You used to be a Christian and now we don't know you anymore." It was a lot of that. That's what little voices sound like. But then the voices get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then Al Mohler weighed in, president of the Southern Baptist Seminary, the largest seminary, I think, in the world. Some people have described him as the Pope of evangelicalism, which is a dumb term because he's not, and not even close. He's just a thought leader in the SBC and a conservative thought leader. He wrote a piece for World Magazine called "The Parable of David French."
Wow, what a title!
I didn't really find the parable in it because it's not like he planted a field or was late for a wedding party or there's nothing. There's no metaphor. There's no parallel.
There's no moral lesson to be learned.
No, there is. So maybe that's all he means. Maybe that's all he means. He criticizes David French heavily for saying that civil same-sex marriage is probably the best agreeable solution for a pluralistic society currently in America. And this is what I wanted to bring up because Al Mohler, says he's wrong now when he asserts that the Supreme Court sufficiently values religious liberty. In other words, churches are going to be shut down and Christians are going to be thrown in jail if they don't go along with all the new stuff. Then he says this, and this is what I wanted to get at, one of the most perplexing marks of our time is the defection of so many quote unquote conservatives from the cause of conserving what Russell Kirk called the permanent things. Okay, so the cause of a conservative is to conserve the permanent things. If marriage, this is Mohler talking, if marriage is not conserved, if civil marriage is not conserved, in other words, just the legal definition in our pluralistic culture is not conserved as a man-woman union, then nothing genuinely conservative can last, at least for long. This is how, and this is his concluding sentence, this is how conservatism dies, and this is how marriage is surrendered.
Those are some sweeping statements.
The broad statements. But here's what I just wanted to point out, because I just find this fascinating. What he doesn't talk about in this is Christianity. What he doesn't talk about this.
Sure he does.
Jesus never comes up.
Yeah,
Christianity doesn't come up.
Well, he said conservatism.
The church
for him, that's Christianity.
He is not defending the faith in this. He's defending conservatism. Conservatism has become the thing that we are supposed to fight for. Not Jesus, not the faith, not the church. And I'm just trying, like, even the notion that nothing genuinely conservative can last, at least not for long. How do we know if that's not a good thing? How do we know what is and isn't good to conserve? If our only value is conservation of what Russell Kirk called the permanent things, and now who gets to decide what are the permanent things? Where does that come from? Because
exactly.
for 100 years, what conservatives fought to conserve in America was racial hierarchy. That was the number one thing conservatives were fighting to conserve, because that was a permanent thing, because that was God established, because that was in the Bible, because the one thing that all Confederate theologians agreed on in 1865 was that the Bible was on their side. It was clear the Bible does not have any problem with slavery, so we are trying to conserve the permanent things. Slavery has always been a permanent thing in history. These northern Yankees who don't know how to read the Bible are trying to take away our way of life, and we must conserve it. So now we say, oh, yeah, but they were wrong. Oh, yeah, that wasn't one of the permanent things. Now we know what the permanent things are, and the permanent things are the nuclear family, as came into existence in 1952. That's a permanent thing. And heterosexual marriage. What else is permanent? Gun rights are permanent, and small government is a permanent thing, and a big military is a permanent thing. These are the permanent, because these, if you look at the history of what the conservative movement in America has been fighting for, it has changed over the years to kind of fit. Same thing with progressivism. We fight for different things depending on where we are, where we're situated, what period we're in. So to say all of this, I can decry David French as a heretic because he is not trying to conserve my permanent things.
It's hard to disagree with you, Phil, and I'm not going to.
Thank you.
But it reminds me, wasn't it Mohler not that long ago who said any Christian who doesn't vote the right way is
unfaithful to God.
Unfaithful to God. It's very similar linguistically here, because for decades and decades, so many white evangelicals have been told that conservatism is the Christian point of view. Yeah. To the point where you no longer have to say that. All you have to say is conservative, or the conservative party, or the conservative point of view. And people, their brains automatically associate that with Christianity, the Bible, Jesus, God, faithfulness. They have done such a brilliant job of branding conservatism as inherently Christian that the brain does it automatically. And therefore, anybody who has a progressive point of view on anything is automatically not Christian. And that's really amazing when you think about it. It's that complete a transformation of the language that for so many people, he doesn't even have to speak about Christianity anymore. They get it. They get, it's not a dog whistle anymore. It's just it's a referee whistle. People hear it and they get it.
They know which team they're on and who needs to go in the timeout box. Christian, what are you thinking? I can see your wheels turning.
Well, one thing is I remember in the 80s, truthfully, and I am so embarrassed to admit this, but meeting a Christian who was a Democrat and being shocked and just couldn't fathom how that could even be possible. And that was the way it was back in the 80s in my, Christian conservative circle. I mean, fast forward all of these years later, and it's just far worse, where, and I don't know how you unring this bell. How the heck do you unring this bell?
Here's how you unring it. Well, it will take forever, but define your terms, okay? Just think about it. Conserving things is not inherently good or bad, depending on what you're conserving. And progress is not inherently good or bad, depending on what direction you're progressing in. What is inherently good is pursuing Jesus. Progressing towards Jesus, conserving what we love about Jesus and believe to be true about Jesus, the orthodoxy about Jesus and the Christian faith, that's worth conserving. Progressing to make people's lives better, that's worth progress on. There's lots of things that we're trying to make progress on, and there's lots of things that we're trying to conserve. Let's just take those two terms as moral indicators and throw them away and say to Al Mohler, can we talk about Jesus and can we talk about the Christian faith and stop talking about conservatism, because that's not the religion we follow.
So just before getting on this recording with you guys, I recorded the last episode of our sub-series, What in the World, which is about the book Inalienable, and had a really interesting conversation with two of the authors, Matthew Sorens, who's been on the show many times, and Eric Costanzo. And one of the questions I asked them, and trust me, this relates, is why are so many Christians okay with engaging all kinds of social good and justice efforts in overseas contexts, but chafe against doing that at home in the U.S. or in their own community? And Matthew Sorens gave a really interesting answer. And he said he thinks part of the reason is we're ignorant about the politics in Honduras or Nicaragua or Guatemala or Africa or India. We don't understand how these things break down politically when we go into a foreign country and engage in these social activities. But here in the U.S., when a systemic issue arises that requires some kind of mobilization, community activism, or political activism, we immediately know, oh, well, that's Democratic, or that's Republican, or that's progressive, or that's conservative. And then it clouds our judgment of whether or not I can engage it because I have to be on my team and not for the other team. And because we don't have those categories for most overseas communities, all we do is go in and ask, well, what does Jesus want us to do here? And we do it. But in America, we don't ask that because we're too beholden to the categories you're talking about, Phil. And it was just a reminder, like, if we could shut down those categories in our imaginations and simply ask, what does Jesus want us to do here? We might be shocked to discover how many things we end up doing that don't conform to the political party that we had belonged to.
Yeah. Yeah.
The question is, whose version of what Jesus?
Well, exactly. And that's where, if you're a political activist and your priority is amassing as large a voter bloc as you can, and that's whether, it doesn't matter what party you're in, or you're in the Green Party or in the Libertarian Party, if you want as many people to line up their morality with your morality, you have to convince them that your morality is biblical. That the Bible promotes big military, small government. And I'm going to find verses to back that up somehow. The Bible promotes private gun ownership, or the Bible promotes school vouchers, or the Bible promotes teachers unions, or the Bible promotes, whatever it is that your side is fighting for. You have to figure out how to find it in the Bible, as opposed to letting the Bible decide what policies you should be fighting for.
Or
we go backwards.
Or admit that maybe this issue the Bible is silent on. And we just need to have a robust, wise, culturally broad conversation about what we think is the best way forward. And agree to disagree at times. And not invoke God in our arguments.
Oh, man. Oh, that's a slippery slope, Skye. That's a slippery slope.
Like, I don't think the Bible has an argument about congressional term limits or socialized medicine.
I saw one in Revelation. It was after 2 terms, like a fire. 2 terms, like a fire. That's where it is. Okay. What I found interesting, and we got to wrap this up because we're going long, and we're going to talk to David French on French Friday, more about this fascinating conversation. To me, it felt like Al Mohler gave away the game. When you get right down to it and you realize he's not worried about conserving Christianity or progressing Christianity. He's worried about conserving conservatism. And the definition he's operating under, which he's already he illuminated in depth with his interview with the Wall Street Journal, or with the New York Times, two issues that we have to worry about right now: sanctity of life, which means abortion. It does not mean the death penalty. It does not mean the poor. It does not mean the environment. It does not mean anything else that affects the sanctity of someone's life, except abortion, he will say, and marriage. Those are the 2 issues that we're supposed to care about, and that means you have to be a Republican or you're not faithful to God.
It's crotch Christianity.
And it's stunning. It's stunning. So it's more important to God that I am a conservative than that I am a follower of Jesus. That is what he's telling me. And you can tweet about that, and I don't care. Okay.
And that's all I have to say about that.
And that's
Forrest
all I have to
Gump.
say about that. I'm going to go watch a Hallmark Christmas movie. Oh, wait, a GAC Christian movie. I don't know who's Christian. I don't even know whose Christmas movies I can trust anymore. Who's got an agenda?
I think we should stick with It's a Wonderful Life and Elf.
And Charlie Brown
Christmas.
Christmas.
Those two, we should
Charlie
be
Brown
good.
Christmas.
And Die Hard.
Linus coming out and reading Luke 2. That's all you need. Do you know why
That is
they
a
did
good one.
that? Do you know why they did that? Because, people think that they put Luke 2 in the Charlie Brown Christmas special because that's what everybody did back then because it was such a Christian age. No. In fact, the producer of the show went to Charles Schultz and said, you really want to put this in here? You really want to put Luke 2 in your Christmas special? And Charles Schultz said, if we don't do that, who will? So he fought the network to get that in there, even in 1962 or whenever they made that show, because he thought he had enough clout to pull it off against the grain of the culture, and he wanted to do it. Okay. He also flew his daughter to Japan to get an abortion, but that's a different story. Good, bad, yin, yang.
Oh my
Can of
goodness.
worms.
What are you going to do? Okay. I read his biography. It's pretty interesting. He's a very complicated guy. But anyway.
I appreciate the history lesson.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Now we're headed into Advent. This is fantastic. It's the first Sunday of Advent. Jesus is coming. Emmanuel's drawing near. Celebrate, even if the world is going crazy and you don't even know who to trust for your sappy Christmas movies anymore. Just listen to the Holy Post and we'll try to help you out. And we have a guest, Skye, right? Guest?
We do.
Right?
We do.
Do you know who?
Josh Packard.
Oh, Josh Packard. He's been on before. Multiple
He
times.
has. Very thoughtful.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Skye. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Being a teenager or young adult has always been difficult, but right now it may be especially challenging for at least two reasons. One, this is the first generation that's really grown up with the stresses of social media, and secondly, the pandemic put unusual strain on this generation socially and mentally. That's why I'm glad to have Josh Packard back on the show today to talk about the mental health of Generation Z. Dr. Josh Packard is the executive director of Springtide Research Institute, and he's no stranger to the Holy Post. He's been on a few times before, always to talk about different aspects of Gen Z and their faith. But this time he's talking about their mental health and what his research has uncovered about the role of faith communities and spiritual practices in cultivating mental health. Our conversation is wide-ranging, and if you're a parent or a pastor or anyone who cares and engages with young people in your life, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to this and think through the ways that you can create an environment for young people today that not only draws them closer to faith, but also equips them to live in a healthy way in a culture that seems increasingly opposed to that outcome. Here is my conversation with Dr. Josh Packard. Josh Packard, welcome back to the Holy Post.
Hey, Skye, thanks for having me. It's always great to be here.
Yeah, I enjoy our conversations, and I am grateful for the research that you guys have been doing. And your latest study has been on mental health in Gen Z. So it seems like every time I get on the internet and I go to a news site, I'm seeing a different headline that is telling me something disastrous about mental health in general. And specific, like just yesterday, I don't know what site I was on, and there was a headline about how Adderall prescriptions are skyrocketing, and the ADHD thing has really been a huge problem post pandemic, and it's one thing after another. So This is obviously a topic that's on the culture's radar, and increasingly it's on churches' radars because, we care about people and their well-being, and it seems like mental health challenges are just accelerating. Give us some of the high-level findings. Like, what were some of the big takeaways from what you guys uncovered about Gen Z and mental health?
Well, yeah. So you're right. I mean, it does seem like a lot of doom and gloom, and I mean, it's one thing, like you want people to take notice and take these things seriously, but also be motivated to act where they can and not be like, holy cow, this is insurmountable. And I think one of the things that we found through this research is that there are real things that people who care about the mental health, especially at the intersection of mental health and faith and spirituality, can do for young people to help support them. And that was really encouraging to me, actually. I mean, yes. So, like nearly half of young people, report being, moderately or severely anxious and depressed, and those all right in line with the kinds of things that we're seeing from mental health professionals and the American Psychological Association, et cetera. But at Springtide, we always say that we want to be useful, not just interesting, and we're an actionable research institute. And so we were able to, at least get from young people, like what would work for them? What do they need from adults? How does their faith life and their spirituality play into their mental health, et cetera? And that was really encouraging to me.
So there was a season prior to COVID where I was speaking pretty regularly at different colleges and universities. And when I would get an opportunity to talk to the administrators, the president, whatever, over lunch, I'd always ask them the same question, like, what's changed in your years in higher ed? And honestly, the most frequent response I got was the level of mental health challenge that they're facing with young people coming in, and a lot of schools not having the capacity or the infrastructure to care for these students. So that brings me to the first area I really want to focus on, which is just prevention. How do we create environments of relative health so that fewer young adults find themselves in these challenges? I mean, we can't obviously mitigate against all of it, but what are some things you uncovered that either these young people told you directly or that you found contributes to mental health in a way that we may not have thought of in the past?
Well, I'm really glad we're using this term mental health. I mean, that's a term we use, and we don't mean it to be synonymous with mental illness the way a lot of people use it. And that's, because we don't think Gen Z is talking about it that way. I mean, when they talk about mental health, they really are talking about the whole range from illness to flourishing and everything in between. And as we cast around at Springtide trying to figure out, is there a role for us to play in this conversation? We don't just want to add to the noise. Certainly nobody needs us to tell them that mental health is an issue among Gen Z. Lots of people more well situated than us to do that have already made those claims. And so we started wondering and looking at, what do we do best? What do we think about? And we're a sociological research institute. We think about organizations and structures and institutions. And that led us to this path of how can we create mental health friendly environments or organizations for young people to flourish and thrive in? And that's really at the heart of this entire series that we're doing on mental health. We had a report for educators come out in the spring, and then the state of religion on young people that came out just this past fall. And then we've got a couple of more things planned, one for parents, one for employers early next year. And that the crux of all of this is trying to create environments that do three things. Can we create environments where young people feel like they belong, that they have this sense of belonging inside of these organizations? And we can break that open if you want to, but for the sake of time, I'll just move on. The second one is, can we align expectations with appropriate tools? So if you're in a school, for example, and the expectation is that you get good grades, do students feel like they have the right tools to get those grades? Or are you doing the things that you think they need, but are not necessarily the things that they actually need? Are you providing all kinds of digital resources, but they don't learn well, without an instructor there, and so those tools don't match? And that, if we don't have that alignment, it leads to a lot of cognitive dissonance and actually creates more problems. And then third, are we fostering a connection between young people and something bigger than themselves? And, we call this purpose, call this faith, religion, whatever, but that is absolutely critical for young people being able to see the setbacks that they have in life as not necessarily the end of the world, but still as part of this bigger project and helping you to be resilient and move through those things. And if we can create organizations that consistently lean into doing those three things for young people: belonging, expectation and tool alignment, and connecting you to something bigger than yourself, then we're doing a lot to sort of be preventative. Now, of course, young people are going to have a certain amount of anxiety is part of growing up. We're not trying to eliminate all anxiety and stress from the life of a teenager. That would be silly.
And it's actually unhealthy to eliminate all
exactly.
of that. Right.
Exactly. It doesn't prepare you for life. I mean, this is what they need. But what we say is that we think if we do those things, that you can keep more of these mental health issues from becoming mental health problems. And that's sort of at that space where we want to live.
Okay. So from some of the data that I had poked around in, you guys uncovered that about 2/3 of young people do not engage in religious services. Mm-hmm. And yet, quite a few of them did say they engage in religious practices or spiritual practices, which was contributed to their mental health.
Yes.
Talk about that gap between involvement in what we might traditionally think of as a religious community versus what these young people are reporting as religious practices. What do they mean by that?
Yeah, well, so they are interpreting a lot. It's a pretty wide spectrum of things that they interpret as religious. So it could be, a lot of it. One of the top level concerns and places of interest for young people is around nature, also art and food, but also things like prayer and reading holy texts, scriptures, etc. for your listeners who I'm sure pay attention to every episode and have probably bookmarked and re-listened to the ones that I've been on before.
They're the most popular for sure.
That's right. They'll recall these conversations around trust that we've been having. And I think this is really just a continuation of that story. I mean, it's no surprise that in this era of declining institutional trust that they would still identify as religious or spiritual, which about 2/3 of them, 3/4 do.
Right.
They would still be looking for these practices, but not necessarily doing it in these sort of traditional, like I'm going to go to a service on a Friday night or a Sunday morning, Wednesday evening, whatever, kind of way. So it's not like that. If you've been following, I mean, for folks who have been following along with Springtide's research, that's not a particularly eye-opening explanation. What I thought was like our eye-opening finding, what I thought was kind of surprising is that even those non-institutional expressions seem to be having the same kind of protective effects around mental health. So regardless of where you're playing out your religion and spirituality, young people are claiming better outcomes if they're religious. They flourish more in their mental health. They flourish more in their spiritual health, their physical health, et cetera, all the way down the line.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll confess something. One of the podcasts I listen to fairly regularly is the Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend podcast.
Yeah, naturally.
Of course. Right. It's what all spiritually mature people do. But on a recent episode, he was talking to someone, I think it was Camille Nanjiani, about his practice. He's a Muslim by background. Mm-hmm. He's from Pakistan originally. And his practice of daily meditation, and how Conan has said for decades he's tried to do daily meditation because, it's apparently the thing you're supposed to do, but he can't do it. His brain is just too frenzied. But as I was listening to these two entertainers talk about it from a very secular point of view, it was clear that they were engaging that what traditionally has been seen as a spiritual practice for their own mental health and well-being. So these two entertainers were engaging this, what we'd consider a spiritual practice for the sake of their own mental health. And there's a secular framework of these practices. And I'm thinking about it from the point of view of a pastor. Like a pastor wants to think, if you are involved in my institution, in my church, and if you are engaged in specifically Christian spiritual practices, that should benefit your life and your mental health. And some of them may chafe at the idea that actually, no, you don't have to be involved in an actual church institution, and you don't have to do explicitly Christian practices in order to get the same mental health benefit. So speak to that pastor or church leader or parent even who's very narrowly focused on their religious tradition and the framework of institution and Christian practice, and why that maybe isn't the hill to die on with the young people in your life.
I have a friend who ran a business, runs a business anymore, speaking in the past tense for a very important reason. And the business centered around this idea that he was going to make the coolest stuff, but also that it was going to be really hard to find. And he was like, that way it's an exclusive club and people feel like they're really in it. And I just looked at him. This is back when I was doing consulting, and I was like, do you care how people come to your business? Like, is that really that important to you? Or do you care that people find their way to this, these designs and to this clothing that you're interested in getting out into the world and being that person? And he's like, I care about both. They have to buy my stuff and they have to come to my, shop in the way that I want them to. And I was just like, man, this just feels like a recipe for failure. And sometimes I wonder if we don't get caught up in that same trap in religion too. It's like, I'm selling you this thing, metaphorically selling you this thing, offering this thing that I know is great. You might not be entirely convinced of, is definitely pretty abstract. And I'm going to care about the intentions and the ways that you come to it. I don't know. So when I see stuff like this, yeah, I get it. You would love for people to come to this with the purest of intentions. But the reality is that people come to religion through a variety of pathways over a long period of time. There's no atheists in a foxhole. Lots of people intermarry. Some people stumble into it from what they call serendipity. I mean, there's a million pathways into religion, and that's no different for young people. Mental health can be one of those. And if you're, if that's especially if that's a language that you speak and are well versed in, you might think about utilizing that, because young people do find solace in a lot of the things that religion has to offer, especially for their mental health. And it's really important to remember that the way somebody comes and the way that somebody is right now is not necessarily the way that they will always be. And that's more true for teenagers than anybody else. I mean, their lives are constant change and flux and exploration and experimentation. And so I don't know. I just wouldn't get too caught up in it. I understand the concern. I mean, wouldn't we all love, for that like voice of God to be ringing in their ears, and then they go to their pastor and they find out what they need to do to formalize this commitment, et cetera. But that might be asking just a little bit more than what is needed.
Yeah. I think it shatters the illusion that a lot of church leaders have that they can actually control what's going on, and
parents too.
And parents too. Yeah. I mean, goodness, having teenagers and young adults is one lesson in releasing control after another.
Yeah.
But it also reflects the fact, two things come to mind. One is when you read the Gospels, people came to Jesus for all kinds of different reasons.
All kinds.
And good, bad, and ugly. And yet anybody in need, he never rejected. He engaged them where they were. He tried to take them along, right? And move them along, as he certainly did with the apostles. But then the other thing is, it seems like a lot of what you guys have uncovered in your research and what these young people are saying, I would put under the category of just common grace. Like there are good things in this world that are available to all people, regardless of their religious tradition, for their flourishing and health, that are part of God's common grace to all people. And that shouldn't be ignored. Going back to this idea of helping young people feel connected in these institutions, whether you're talking about a school or a business or a faith community, you guys unpack some of the critical ways that happens. One is you identify that young people need a safe place or safe relationships with others they can talk to.
Yeah.
What does that look like in a faith community? What have you seen work in cultivating that level of trust and relational connection?
Well, so I'll point to another data point, which is we asked young people, what has most helped you to discover your sense of purpose in life? And at the bottom, I'm saying in the single digits on this list, at the very bottom was all the sort of formal religious things. So instruction, attending services, all the institutional religious stuff.
Sermons.
Exactly. And none of those things are bad, right? But the question is, in a young person's perspective, what has helped them to discover purpose? And at the top of that was being able to ask questions. Being able to ask questions. And, so that as we looked around at, and asked young people like, okay, so specifically, what are some places, who are some people? And when we see ministries in the Christian world that are really thriving, and even in the non-Christian world, I mean, they're really sort of centered around the idea that you can ask questions, and not questions that you need necessarily answers to. And I think this is where even a lot of what I would say are more progressive Christian responses can get hung up here. It's like, they genuinely want to do the right thing. And so instead of having like a Sunday morning Bible study, they'll have a Sunday morning, bring your questions time. And, you can ask questions to the pastor or to the Sunday school teacher or whomever, and they'll answer them. And I don't think that's quite what Gen Z means by this. That wouldn't come across to them as the same kind of resource. What they're looking for is more of like, who can help me to ask the right questions? Who can help me to ask better questions and then start exploring those together? Because sometimes they're not even sure of exactly what they're after. It's not like they have a factual question that needs to be answered and you can provide it. It's that they're wondering how to make sense of their life, and questions are the ways to do that. I think if we can just take that one little shift of perspective away from question and answer to question and exploration, that's where we start to see a lot of success and inroads.
Okay, that sounds very customized and intimate almost, where so much of the ministry culture that I was formed in the 1990s and early 2000s was driven by this assumption that we can mass produce disciples, that we can put people on an assembly line and churn them through a program, and out will pop, healthy, spiritually engaged people. And what you're describing is so customized. Again, it's you have to get to know that one person and engage them where they're at. And that feels a lot messier, but a lot healthier. Related to that, going on in this post that I read about young people engaging in these communities, you talk about how they need to be guided and not forced. That sounds like what you're saying already. Like it's help me figure out the right questions to ask rather than just spitting out the answers I'm supposed to have. But this last one kind of caught me. Young people are saying that they want to be challenged, but they don't want to be defeated. Unpack what that means, because there is this reputation of young adults today as snowflakes, right? They're incapable of handling difficult things. So when your report says they want to be challenged, that kind of caught my attention.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of, there's this, if you're a big fan of The Office, there's this like deep cut where Ryan is saying like, I want to be led, but like, don't lead me, you know?
Yeah, perfect example.
First of all, just the snowflake comment is just great. I mean, sometimes I do this as a part of presentations I give where I quiz the audience with various quotes about young people, and they go all the way back to Aristotle and then through Peter the Hermit and like a whole bunch. And they're basically all saying the same thing, which is young people have no respect. They're snowflakes, like they can't handle adversity, blah, blah, blah. So this is a claim that adults level at teenagers literally for thousands of years. I don't know that young people today are, demonstrably different in that regard than they've ever been. The issue here, I think, is about like, what is the, what kind of challenge are you putting in front of young people? Is it the challenge to conform to the way that I want you to be, in which case they're probably just going to reject that out of hand, regardless of how easy it is? Or is it the challenge to go further and deeper in that exploration, to ask the right and better questions, to offer up alternative ways of thinking about things? And one of the ways we've seen that be really useful is to do that through the spirit of mutual like conversation. So instead of telling a young person how to think or believe, we find a lot more traction with adults who are like, here's how I came to this position. How are you coming to your positions? And that inherently ends up being challenging because they're perceiving you as a listener, which is breaking down some of this resistance that they have, while also getting exposed to a different set of viewpoints. Now, it doesn't mean that the weird part as an adult is that it doesn't mean you get to go to bed at night thinking like, I fixed that kid. Like it's harder that way than it is if you stand up on a stage and you're like, here are the 7 things, drill them into your head because these are the 7 things that matter. You get to go to sleep at night and think to yourself, I did it. I did what I was supposed to do. But when you do it this other way, this relational way, you go to bed every night a little uneasy. I fully admit that. Like I get that it's messier.
Okay, let's talk about loneliness a little bit. For a long, long time, really malevolent folks have realized that one of the best ways to torture someone is by isolating them.
Yeah.
Right? That's just part of our psychology. When we're isolated, we break down pretty quickly. And there's been a ton of research from many places talking about how lonely not just young people are, but everyone is in our society, right? We're increasingly disconnected, ironically, despite having more technological connection available to us than ever before.
And because of it, yeah.
Right. That's the Sherry Turkle did that wonderful book, Alone Together, talking about this paradox. What are some barriers to, or let me start this way. You guys are pursuing something called the Less Lonely Project. What is that?
So that's great. That's an effort out of 92Y. That was a campaign that they ran in the spring responding to this. So it's not just that Americans are lonely and therefore young people are lonely. It's that young people are actually the loneliest cohort that we've ever measured, ever. Not just now, but ever. And that's never happened. It's always the oldest generation up until now that's usually the loneliest, the most isolated. And that was, it's really... You pointed out the crux of why we entered into that campaign and why we Belonging was the first book that we ever wrote, the first report we put out, and why we continue to stay in this arena is because it is so counterintuitive. You just like your dominant image, like if I say the word teenager to you and you think of an image in your head, it's probably with like a kid in a hoodie and their head down on, and thumbs, whirling away on a device. And so you think like, how could they possibly be lonely? And it just doesn't make any sense, and to most people. And so that's part of the reason why we continue to push into this narrative. The reality is, social media is not necessarily the boogeyman here, but social media combined with the pandemic really doesn't help. It's not because social media is inherently bad. It's that it hasn't been around that long, and we don't have very good parenting norms around it. We're only just in the last couple of years beginning to understand what's going on in terms of like how it's impacting our young people. The people who run these companies do not have young people's best interests in mind. I don't think they're out to get young people, but their goal is to keep you glued to the screen for as long as possible. And the algorithm will, produce whatever content makes you stare the most. And that's not always the healthiest stuff for young people. So we've got to get some parenting norms around this that are, somewhere between unfettered access and then complete shutdown. We've got to find some healthy ways to get young people to learn how to engage with this stuff, but it's still new.
So a couple weeks ago, we had a guest on the show, Jay Kim, who's a pastor in Silicon Valley. He's written a couple of books, Analog Christian and Analog Church. And he talked about how and he's right in Silicon Valley, right? This is the belly of the beast in a way. But he talked about how one of the phrases they use a lot in their congregation is linger longer. Trying to get people to stay in physical proximity to one another, after a church service, or just be in one another's presence rather than through a screen, as just a really practical way of incarnating community and helping people feel connected. Are there other simple practices that you have uncovered with congregational life or just any community life that has demonstrated the ability to help people feel more connected to one another and mitigate against this loneliness?
With young people, I don't think you can downplay the importance of common tasks. So and not necessarily common tasks that support the institution, because again, I think that's probably not a great place to start.
Yeah, it feels manipulative.
It's not only, and even if it's not though, like even if it's organizing a clothing drive, for example, or a food drive, like through through the food bank at your church, like even that could be a difficult step for young people who, again, are walking, like the assumption that you need to have to shift towards is that they're operating with low trust for your institution. And so even that might not be the right thing, but I'll go back to the big three that we found during the pandemic that have continued. It's nature, it's food, and it's art. And if you can find ways to, those are the places that young people said that they found a lot of spiritual connection and meaning during the pandemic. And that doesn't seem to be going away. I mean, the environment in particular is a top level existential, like sort of 1950s nuclear crisis concern for young people. So the more that we can be in nature with young people together doing something, I think that you're going to find a lot of headway there. The more that we can lean into the arts, cooking together is huge. These are things that are not these are not part and parcel of most Bible studies or Sunday school curriculums or liturgies, but I think they should be. I mean, it was really interesting. I led a workshop and we listed up the things that helped young people find purpose in life, starting with asking questions, and then those other three and a few other things popped up. And then I asked the group of youth ministers in the room at their small tables. I gave them like 10 minutes, and I said, how much of your ministry is built around the things that are at the top of this list? And the answer was just very, very few. And so I think we actually have some of these answers. Like it's not, we don't have to just keep shooting arrows into the dark to get people to engage in real life. And I'll just say, to wrap this part up, like young people one of the things the pandemic did produce is that young people are beginning to see the limits of technology. Now they don't always, because their brains are not, 15-year-old's brain is not fully mature. Like they don't know how to disengage from it. It's like the dopamine hit that you get from scrolling and even the outrage that you find online, et cetera. Like that's addictive in a very real way.
Right.
But they know it's not good for them. They don't necessarily know how to get rid of it, but they know it's not, it cannot be everything for them.
Yeah. Speaking of that, just last night, I was at a small gathering of parents at someone's home to talk about Young Life, which is a ministry a lot of people are aware of. And there was a 10th grade girl in this gathering, and I've known her most of her life. And she shared about how she grew up in a Catholic environment, wonderful family. And as she was getting older, a lot of questions and curiosities about faith and God and all those kinds of things, got connected to Young Life, ends up going to a Young Life camp. And when she discovered that they were going to take away their phones for the week, she was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, how on earth can I survive a week without my phone? And yet to this group of adults, she said it was the best week of my life.
Yeah.
And it was all because putting aside those devices, and everyone else obviously did as well, gave her the space to connect with other people, connect with God, connect with her leader, all that. And that connection was so transformative. The big takeaway I'm getting from your research and from other conversations I've had on this topic, and I'm certainly no expert in mental health, is that it's a huge component of this is connection. Yeah. It's connecting relationally in small connections, in larger community connection, and then a sense of connection to the cosmos, to be really generic about it, but a sense of belonging to a larger vision of the world so that I can put my own struggles in a broader context. And in its best form, that's what faith does. And arguably what Christian faith does in my opinion, better than any other. But talk about what are some of those, you talk about a process of belonging in some of your research and the steps that people go through. In the minutes we have left, can you just walk us through that and how you see that working effectively when it's done right? What does it look like?
Yeah, so this process that we have been doing research on and validating over the last few years is called noticed, named, and known. And you have to, in order to do it really effectively, I think you have to put on your empathy hat and try and really remember and understand what it's like to be a teenager. And so on this first step of being noticed, it's openly and vocally acknowledging the presence of young people in your space when they come across your path, either like in virtual paths, or in real life is important. Young people tell us all the time that their dominant experience with adults is of feeling dismissed or invisible. It's heartbreaking because I also know that a lot of adults are they don't think of young people as invisible, but we got to counter that perception. And so
we have to, don't assume that they think they're being noticed. Really go out of your way to make sure they're being noticed. Exactly.
And I think about this, there's a gym that I've been going to for, I guess, like almost a decade now. And it's CrossFit. I mean, of course, like I'm a middle-aged white guy, so of course I'm doing CrossFit. The box owner there does this great thing. Like every time somebody walks through the door, regardless of what's going on in the entire gym, he says hello to them and he says their name. And it's so I'll walk in the door and he'll be like, "Hey, Josh," and then like goes right back to what he's doing. But it's that simple moment of acknowledgement that sometimes for teenagers, like it's going to be weird, right? Like my son wakes up in the morning, he's 12, he comes up the stairs, he's still groggy. I insist that he gives me a hug every morning. He does not want to do that, right? He wants to go down, he wants to go get ready for the day and eat his breakfast and then maybe give me a hug. But I make sure that he knows that I see him right away at the beginning of the day. So noticing somebody as a first step is huge, especially for a group of people who feel invisible. And then naming them. That second step of naming works at a couple of levels. There's both the very literal, like, do you actually know the names of the young people in your community? Do you know some basic facts about them? Like, do you know their birthday? Do you know their favorite food? When their math test is coming up that they care about. This is where we get into these sort of more metaphorical ways. When we wrote this noticed, named, and known, when we started playing around with this, we never thought that calling a young person by name would be a controversial topic, but for some people it apparently is.
Why is it controversial?
I mean, because we're talking about like, young people's, there's the name that they might have and the name that they might go by and nicknames. And,
okay.
that doesn't play the same with all religious groups. But still, finding a way to make sure that young people understand that more than just sort of acknowledging their presence, you've taken the next step to know something sort of about them. That's what we mean by named. And then in this last step, it's in known, which we can't really get to known if you're not doing the first two steps, is that the young person, that your organization wouldn't be the same if that young person wasn't there. And so this means that we're inviting them in for participation or that we're letting them make real decisions. I mean, I think about this like in a strange like metaphor. Like if people are going out to dinner at a movie, this is like, oh, Josh doesn't get off of his shift until 6:30, so we won't go to dinner until 7, and we won't watch that movie until 8. And which movie did you want to see, Josh? Like, in that way, it's like a really tight-knit friend group would never think about going to dinner and a movie at 6 o'clock when one of their friends doesn't get off work till 6:30. But you can't get to that. Like nobody just gets an invitation into known or a status into being known if they don't feel noticed and named first. What we found is that if you can get young people through those 3 stages, then their feeling of belonging that goes way up. And this is a process. It takes time. It takes intentionality. This is not something that happens overnight, but it's really critically important. And likely, you're probably not starting from scratch, with all young people in your community, but you can plot these out. We've seen people do it. They actually track these for every young person, and they try and figure out what stage they're at by various markers and move them along.
That's super helpful. And I'm thinking about communities I'm a part of where I can do this better, for sure. As we wrap up, one thing I have to remind myself of from time to time is we are infinitely complicated creatures. Yeah. And mental health is a very, very complex thing. And everything we've talked about is not meant to be a formula or some kind of magic, step-by-step program that will guarantee the mental health of every young person in your life or community.
Right.
We are infinitely complicated, but these are things that we could probably talk about our own adolescence and feeling known and named and welcomed, and how that helped us stabilize through what can be a very tumultuous season of life. So these are just proven wise things that help us feel connected and can keep us grounded and grow us in a relatively healthy way. But no doubt there are people listening to this who have either struggled strongly with mental health themselves or have someone they love in their life that is wrestling with it. And it is a growing problem. I don't want anyone to hear this and think, well, I must have screwed up this way or that way, and that's why this is happening to me or something. That's not the case. But you do have more resources on your website at Springtide for congregations, church leaders, parents, educators. A couple things you want to highlight before we go, or where people can find out more?
Yeah, just to underscore again, all of our stuff is not meant to take the place of mental health professionals. In fact, this whole project for us started because a young person on our advisory board said that was relaying the story to us that when he was struggling with some mental health issues, he went to his youth minister, and his youth minister said to pray about it. And when that didn't work, he said he walked away feeling like, great, now my faith life sucks and my mental health life sucks. And I thought, like, oh, shoot, like that's a really bad place to be, right? Like that's no good. So all the stuff that we're writing about here is meant to be, in conjunction with real mental health professionals. And we encourage leaders, parents, congregations, et cetera, to make sure they know where those resources are in their community. On the preventative side, if you're interested in more about what we're researching about Springtide here in the intersection of faith, especially with these things, and we have a mental health landing page where we actually combine all of this stuff. And I would just direct people there. So you can find all the Instagram lives that we've recorded with various leaders on this topic from different faith traditions and areas of expertise. We can find our different publications and our resources. We've got, like I said, educators, religious leaders, then coming soon for parents and employers, guides early next year.
Well, Josh, like I said, this is everywhere, not just in the headlines, but every one of us have people in our lives that are facing mental health challenges. And anyone who's a parent of a young person or has young people in their life recognizes the needs of this generation. So thank you for resourcing us and guiding us and making things available to help us wherever we may be in that process. So thanks for being back with us.
Yeah, thanks, Skye. Appreciate it.
The Holy Post podcast is a production of Holy Post Media. Production assistance by Julie Betcher. Editing by Jason Rugg. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by supporting us at patreon.com/Holy Post. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele, and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, Holy Post merchandise, and much more.